All right, we are here at the Radial Arm Saw. Let's talk about some safety concerns with this machine. So first, and as is the case with our shop in general and all of our machines, we will always make sure we've got our safety glasses on. When debris comes out of this machine, if it goes into your eyes, it can absolutely cause some serious damage. The next item that we need to talk about here is our 4-inch rule. And this is our general shop rule, although we've talked about a number of exceptions with some other machines. On the Radial Arm Saw, absolutely 100%, you never want your hands closer than 4 inches away from this blade when it's spinning. And oftentimes you will probably feel like 4 inches is too close. The reason for the 4-inch rule is that when things go wrong on a machine like the Radial Arm Saw, they go wrong extremely quickly and you will not have time to react to it. If your hand, through some sort of jam or kickback situation, ends up in this blade, it absolutely has the power and the ability to cut off your finger or your fingers very quickly before you even know what has happened. So it's really, really important to make sure we're always staying a minimum of 4 inches away from the blade on this machine. Let's talk about how to safely hold your workpiece. Now, when you are using the stop block, it's extremely important that you make sure you're always holding your workpiece between the stop block and the blade. So if I were making a cut on this piece of material right here, I cannot safely hold the material on this side and make my cut. I'm physically capable of doing that, but I can't do it safely. And the reason I can't do that safely is this. If I hold the material over here, when the saw blade finishes cutting through this material, the piece on the opposite side that's not being held, in this case, the piece that's on the same side as the stop block, wants to be pushed away naturally by the rotation of the blade. However, the stop block is holding it in place, and what it can actually do is force this piece back into the back side of the blade. Because we know the blade is rotating up on the back side, if that happens, that piece is now going to get kicked out by the saw, and we don't know where it's going to go. Flying material is always dangerous. So for that reason, we have to hold our workpiece on the same side of the saw as the stop block. So our hand holding our workpiece will always be between stop block and saw. Now, if we're not using the stop block, I can safely hold either side of this workpiece. And most commonly, I would hold the larger side and let the smaller side be the cutoff piece. But that's not a requirement. So let's talk about what we're going to do if we need to cut a short piece of material and there's no way to hold the material safely and observe the 4-inch rule. So you can see here, I'm making a small cut. Based on the setting on the stop block, I'm cutting this piece to 3 3/4 inches in length. So in this situation, I cannot safely hold my material with my bare hand and make the cut while observing the 4-inch rule. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a push stick. In this case, the push stick is just a long, skinny, straight piece of material. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold back away from the end, and I'm going to place one end of the piece on the corner of the workpiece, pushing down and into the table. And with it like this, I can now safely draw the saw out, holding the correct part of the workpiece, and continue to observe the 4-inch rule, keeping my hands away from the blade. Another situation we have to be aware of at the Radial Arm Saw is a situation we call running. The saw has a tendency, when you begin your cut, to want to run towards you, like this. When the saw runs, it happens much faster than that, and it's not safe to simulate, so I'm not going to demonstrate it in any of our videos. But there is a certain reason why this happens. In the same way, your car tire rotates and pushes your car forward. When this saw blade is rotating and it contacts your workpiece that it's going to cut through, the rotation of the blade gives the saw the desire, if it's capable of that, to jump out and run towards you. This can be a dangerous situation because it can cause you to lose control of your workpiece. It can also cause your hands to slip towards the blade. So it's critical when you're using the radial arm saw that you've got a firm grip on the handle and that you are both pulling the saw towards you and at the same time holding back against that natural desire the saw has to run out towards you. It seems a little odd to be instructed that you are going to be both pulling and pushing simultaneously. But when you get into the shop and you try this for the first time, you're going to feel that tendency the saw has to run towards you. And you're going to understand what I mean when I say you have to both pull and push at the same time. It's a good, firm grip on this machine to keep it under control while you're making your cut and to prevent it from running towards you. Another risk factor at the radial arm saw comes when people don't have their workpiece secured correctly. In our setup video, we talked about the importance of pushing down onto the table and back towards the fence to stabilize our workpiece when we're working on this machine. And that really is critical. If you are not holding your workpiece securely, when the saw blade touches the workpiece, you run the risk of this piece getting thrown somewhere in the shop. It may hit you, it may hit one of your classmates. You have to hold this workpiece tight against the table and the fence, and also the stop block if we're using it. The primary reason that I emphasize so much holding your workpiece down on the table and back against the fence is this. If my workpiece is not against the fence, maybe I'm trying to get an angled cut here, a miter cut. This would not be the place to make that cut. But maybe I were trying to do that. If I draw the saw out at the cut point right here, because of the rotation of the blade, the saw is far stronger than I am. It's going to grab this workpiece and rip it right out of my hands and throw it. The only way that we can sufficiently control our workpiece on the radial arm saw is to make sure that we start with the workpiece tight against the table and tight against the fence before we begin making our cut. Now, to that end, it's also important that we never let go of our workpiece. And this really comes into play when we talk about the machine getting jammed. Sometimes, because of either the saw running towards you, or maybe you're just cutting a thick workpiece with some strain in the grain, and as you cut it, especially on thicker material, when we get into 8/4 material, this tends to happen more often. As you're cutting through, the strain in the grain actually causes the board to pinch down and lock onto the blade. And when that happens, the blade gets jammed. It stops turning. Most people's reaction when that happens is to let go. And we never want to do that because the machine is still powered on. And it's possible that it could grab that workpiece and now throw it because we're not holding it down on the table. In the event that the saw jams, either because it ran and got caught in the material because it was moving faster than it could cut, or a thick piece of material pinches down and locks the blade, in either of those situations, these are your steps, and it's critical that these are followed in order. Number one, we're going to stay calm, and we're going to hold on to our workpiece. We never, ever let go of our workpiece. As soon as we let go of it, we are no longer in control, and we don't know what the saw is going to do. So we always hold on to our workpiece. Our next step would actually be to let go of the saw. The saw has already stopped. The blade is not turning. So as long as we control our workpiece, The saw is not going anywhere. So we're going to hold our workpiece and we're going to let go of the saw with, in this example, my right hand. And I'm going to switch the saw off. Once the saw is powered down, I'm going to push it back into position. Sometimes, if it's pinched really tight on the blade, this could be difficult and you may need some assistance. Once I've got the saw back, pushed all the way back on the carriage behind the fence and behind the workpiece, I can now clear my mind, take a deep breath, prepare to make my cut, and then I can power the saw on and I can make my cut. This is an exception to the rule. You do not have to talk to your instructor if this happens. Simply power the saw off, maintain control of your workpiece and don't let go. And once the jam has been cleared and the blade has been freed from the workpiece, it can be restarted and you can make your cut. So those are the steps and the procedures that we're going to follow to make sure we're being as safe as we can be here at the Radial Arm Saw.